Welcome back to the discussion Combating Insider Threat in Government, sponsored by Verona on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM and federalnewsradio.com. My guest today is Brian Vecchi, Technical Evangelist, Verona. I'm your moderator, John Gilroy. You know, I've been getting emails, people threatening and saying, don't do this, don't do that. And you know, I hear these things about ransomware, but really it hasn't affected me and my family. It must be fake news, right, Brian?
It's not fake news at all, and it's affecting everybody. Ransomware is an attack, if you're not aware, where an attacker gets access inside the network and locks down your data and then asks for payment. It literally holds your valuable assets, your data, your files and emails for ransom, which is why it's called ransomware. It's insidious because it doesn't necessarily take a very sophisticated hacker to get in and encrypt data. All you need is a way to get paid, and with Bitcoin, you can get that completely anonymously. Ransomware is hitting every industry, every vertical, from small businesses all the way up to the biggest enterprises and the federal government, like no other attack ever before, because it's so easy to get in, and once an attacker is in, they have access to everything that any user has access to, which means that lots of really valuable information are exposed, and it's very easy to lock it down and hold it for ransom.
Well, we were in Washington, D.C., and we did the mandatory talk about the White House. Now I do the mandatory acronym.
Sure.
And the acronym I'm going to choose is the Identity Theft Resource Center, ITRC. And, you know, it's just what made June here. And what they're saying is that 2017 data breaches are at a record pace. Mm-hmm. That's not good.
No, it's not good. These problems aren't going away. The Verizon data breach report just came out. 20% of all data that organizations store is open to everybody, which means all of that information is available to any attacker that gets through your perimeter, gets through your firewall. Data is open to everybody. Nobody's watching how it's being used, which means these kinds of attacks are going to increase in frequency, not decrease.
So is the solution then to monitor employees? I mean, aren't there some civil, liberty requirements here? Where do you draw the line?
I think you draw the line at protecting your assets. A bank would monitor every single person that goes into its vault, would monitor every single person that transfers money between accounts. Organizations need to start thinking about their data in the same way. Users shouldn't have access to data that they don't need, and data shouldn't be accessed unless it's recorded. You can't catch what you can't see. And as an organization, if you want to protect your data, you need to monitor how it's being used.
Well, I get news, another acronym here, and the acronym is NIST, N-I-S-T, home of PhDs galore. You go up there, I mean, they're huge brains. They carry on the brains in wheelbarrows. And so they have a lot of controls that they suggest that you use. Now, are these just put on the shelf, or these work, or do you work with Verona in these controls, or how do they relate to Verona?
We do, and NIST controls are both very detailed and relatively strict for how users should get access to the data that's regulated under those kinds of controls. What ends up happening, though, is that when we're talking about files and emails, the amount of data has completely outpaced our ability as a society or as a given organization to secure it. We have more data than we can possibly manage, and so the security of that information has fallen behind. We live in a completely different world, though. You can't leave data open to everybody. You can't let data be accessed by anybody that you want. So what NIST says is you need to put these kinds of controls around your data. What's been difficult in the past is to apply those controls to files and emails, which is what we're helping our customers do.
And so what Verona has is a framework to apply some appropriate controls, among other things.
Yeah, what we've realized is that traditional approaches using disparate tools and native logging and manual processes haven't worked, which is why we see breach after breach after breach on the front page. What Verona has done is built a category of product that we call a data security platform. And what a data security platform does is replace all of those disparate small tools with a single platform that combines data classification with behavior monitoring and analysis, with data access governance and identity management for unstructured data for files and emails. A data security platform helps our customers reduce costs, reduce exposure, respond to breaches faster, and make sure that those kinds of controls, the NIST controls that we've talked about, actually can be applied to their files and emails.
You know, my federal listeners love true stories from the real world. And if something works in the real world, they figure it may apply to them too. And Verona must have some all kinds of notches in their belt for going into companies, because they're going to say, give me the ROI in 2 weeks. You give me the ROI pretty quick, don't you?
We've got more than 5,500 customers globally, both federal and in the private sector. We've been doing this for 12 years. We've had more success than anybody else in helping our customers manage and protect this specific kind of information. files, and emails.
I mean, the problem is let's say a bank, John Gilroy Bank, has an intrusion. I'm not going to put that in the front page of the New York Times. I'm not going to say anything. I may call up my old rep, Brian, and go, hey, Brian, thank you. But you can't really brag about some successes. I mean, you have to just say, well, we have 5,500 people. Something must be working.
Yeah, in this case, it's probably good not to be on the front page,
Yes.
right? We got 5,500 customers, and they're not telling the world just how secure that they are. But these are the companies that realize that the disparate way of doing things in the past, the manual controls, simply never worked. And they're putting a platform in place, and they're having success.
So you automate controls for humans and controls for data. Is that right? Or just one or the other?
For both. So we help you understand where your most sensitive data is, where it's at risk, who's got access to it, and most critically, how it's being used. We monitor all behavior, whether it's human beings or machine accounts. So we can tell when an administrator stops behaving like an administrator and starts looking at the CEO's or the commanding officer's inbox. We tell you when a service account, a machine account, stops behaving like a service account. And maybe those credentials have been exposed to somebody outside the network and now they're using them to exfiltrate data. We also tell you when a user starts behaving strangely and encrypting data, meaning they may have clicked on one of those emails and now they're the target of a ransomware attack.
Yeah, it's really dancing real close to something called artificial intelligence, deep learning, machine learning. Maybe take a little break and come back. And is this what it touches on, really?
Absolutely. We're looking at sophisticated ways of analyzing user behavior, and we can dig into that.
Yeah, that's great. That's interesting. So I think maybe we can talk about what deep learning is and what AI is and what it isn't and how this applies to protecting data for our federal listeners.
Absolutely.
We're going to pause here for a short break. My guest today is Brian Vecchi, technical evangelist, Verona. I'm your moderator, John Gilroy, on the discussion, Combating Insider Threat in Government, sponsored by Verona on Federal News Radio 1500 AM and federalnewsradio.com.